for letting us invite quite three speakers that come from all over the world. Thank you as well to Esther. She just left, but she let us organize this talk. Welcome to the Extremism Inequalities Nexus discussion, the causal relationship between inequalities and extremisms. Cal Matthews is the Executive Director of the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies. I am the project coordinator there. Then we have Hani Denial, an Egyptian writer and social activist, and Islamist for the Islamist Movement Portal. And then we have Ashwini Kuman Shrivastava, I'll let you do it, from Press Trust India in New Delhi. So as you can see, we have assembled people from different regions just because we wanted to really have an open discussion about this subject today. I will let the speakers kind of present themselves for 5-7 minutes, talk about the subject and what they're working on and what they think they have a say on this. So Kyle, why don't you start, perhaps?
Hello, is this working? Yes. Thank you. It's great to be here. It's the 4th year that we've been a partner of the Global Media Forum. I think it's one of the most exciting conferences to go to meet journalists and people working on human rights and international affairs. You know, I think this is a really interesting question about, is there a link or a causal relationship between inequality, or what some people might call poverty within societies, and violent extremism? I tend to believe that it's somewhat exaggerated. I'm not sure about everyone else where you come from, what regions, but Canada in particular, we've seen a rise of violent extremism. We've had a pretty significant number of citizens who have traveled to Iraq and Syria to join ISIS-Daesh. And it's been very simplified for some of our journalists talking about people who have gone there because they're poor or they're marginalized. And that's an argument that is made not by all journalists, but by some. And a lot of the public has consumed that information and believes it. But I don't think it's entirely true. And I think that's why we have to discuss this, because if you want to deal with violent extremism, you have to understand what it is in order to come up with accurate policies to deal with this. And my first question would be, okay, if we think violent extremism is tied to poverty, then the question I pose to you is, let's think of Osama bin Laden. He's a poster child for violent extremism of the 21st century. Now, he was a millionaire. He left a life of luxury to go to impoverished countries to plan terrorist attacks. So his example kind of, I would argue, showcases that not all cases of violent extremism is tied to poverty. There are people that actually are quite well educated in life that succumb to different violent extremist ideologies and will act out on those impulse ideologies themselves. And I talked about Osama bin Laden. He's face of some of these jihadi extremist networks, but there's also we have from Rohingya in the persecution of the Rohingya in Myanmar. We have a rise of Buddhist nationalist extremism. We have a rise of populism in the West of both far right and far left populism. So there are many different extremisms, but some of what I will cover is related to more of the ISIS type, because I think that's one that covers with our work and also with preventing mass atrocities and genocide. It's quite interesting too. Lately, we've seen a lot of UN development agencies start to get involved in violent extremism, start to have this in their program. However, when I did my master's in international development, a good 2 decades now, that shows my age, there was no theories, no one talked about we must eradicate poverty because of violent extremism. It just wasn't there. And it seemed now that we have development actors that are jumping on this. Maybe it's to get a piece of the pie and the money, but it's showing something. And I would just say that I think one of the things that does somewhat explain violent extremism, and there are many causal factors. One of the biggest ones is real or perceived grievances by individuals in life. But the other thing that I think explains it perhaps better in some cases is what we call the youth bulge. In societies that have a massive demographic growth in its population, and people have, social scientists have proven that when you have a youth bulge in societies that cannot provide jobs, employment opportunities for youth, particularly men, you can see a rise of crime or violence. So there is a link there, but I would say that doesn't explain everything. Recently, we had the pleasure of actually doing a series of op-ed pieces on Boko Haram in Nigeria. Some people call them the ISIS of West Africa. And we actually had the Nobel Prize winner, Wole Soyinka, write an op-ed piece about violent extremism in Nigeria. And he really, in his piece that's on opencanada.org, said the chattering classes of Nigeria were extremely wrong, saying they tied it to poverty. He gives examples of teachers being murdered for students, not because of poverty, but because of insult to religious identity. So I think the poverty theory does kind of veer into more of a social theory in class, but doesn't always explain movements that are not trying to achieve that social equality. I think if we look at, some of the people that join different groups, there are individuals that join armed groups for different reasons. Some of them do it for money, to survive. Others, for example, in ISIS, there have been a lot of studies that have shown that while people that have joined ISIS in Iraq or Syria have done it for survival or for real or perceived grievances, many people from the West have done it for a much deeper identity issues. So it's complex. And I would just say, if we only focus on the poverty aspect, if we turn away from the jihadist groups and look at, let's say, the violence in Myanmar of the Rohingya, we saw the UN totally fail there. The UN didn't want to bring up the human rights persecutions of the Rohingya, the minority that's persecuted by the authorities. They believe that if they took a development approach, that if they help the entire country grow, have economic growth, if they had these programs that were long going that would reduce inequalities in society, they would not see persecution, human rights abuses. They wouldn't see any of this violent extremism of the Buddhist type, and we see quite clearly that they were wrong. So I think from policymakers, we have to be careful. And maybe my last comment, because I know I've spoken over 5-6 minutes, is that if we really believe that violent extremism is caused by inequality, then we have to apply a very simple analysis. Everyone knows what the Gini coefficient is. I hope so. The Gini coefficient is a measure of statistical dispersion intended to represent the income on wealth distribution among national residents, most commonly used to measure inequality. And if you look at some of the countries with the worst Gini coefficient, the most unequal societies in the world, they don't produce the most violent extremists. I'm looking at the recent list here of the highest unequal country. It's Lesotho in Africa. They don't have a violent extremist problem. South Africa, they've got some criminal problems, but not serious violent extremism. We have Micronesia, Haiti, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, Comoros. If inequality is the key that some people make you believe that causes violent extremism, then I just told you that the countries that have the least unequal ones don't produce the kind of violent groups that we're seeing today. So I think we have to really question, as journalists, as policymakers, as human rights defenders, if we want to get to the hub and prevent violent extremism, we have to actually have a much wider view than just the inequality lens. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Hani, you come from Egypt. So what's the situation like over there? I know in your pre-interview you spoke about marginalization and deprivation among young people.
Thank you to be there. I think it is a good question about the situation now. Maybe it's for 40 years we have this problem because a lot of poor villages in Upper Egypt. So we have problems in education. We have a problem in culture. Maybe the government tried to solve it, but we have a longer time to do it. In the same time, we have a lot of people use social media and active in Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I talked with Kelly in the morning about a lot of people have 3 iPhone and 4 cell phone. It's a different country for that, but we have double models. Maybe you have a lot of people is rich and the majority is very poor. We haven't in the middle session. I think is the main problem for this start, the agenda for government. I remembered I met someone who put a rules for Egypt 2020, maybe in 1997, but the government did not support this project. He called him Dr. Ismail Sabra Abdullah, is former minister in 1974, but the government not supported that. Maybe the government will have a plan, and after 2 years is cancel this plan, so we haven't vision for the future. In the same time, we haven't a good NGOs, we haven't a good political parts. Have a lot of problem with culture, so most of youth join with extremism groups because they can't talk with them, and the government didn't try to open a good dialogue with the youth. Maybe it makes that one per year, just a conference with youth, but maybe 40% for Egyptian from youth. What about the agenda for that? How to talk with youth? What you need? What you do? How to participate or join with the government, with minister? We haven't that. So it is the only way for extremism groups.
Maybe Ashwini, you can talk to us about India and Pakistan and Kashmir, that region where you come from.
Right, thank you, Mary. I come from a very vibrant and diverse democracy. Diverse because it has 1.3 billion people speaking 122 languages, over 1,600 dialects, following 7 major religions, Hindu, Muslim, Christianity, and comprising 3 major ethnic groups, Caucasian, Mongolites, Dravidians. Now, India, it's vibrant in the sense that 50% of population is under 25 years of age, and 65% of total population is under 35 years of age. So I say it's both vibrant and diverse democracy. But then, having said that, diversity has its own problem. We have our internal and external problems. And the twin challenge which my country faces of inequality and extremism, inequality in forms of people not getting proper social benefits, lack of employment, healthcare, medical center, and so much. And about extremism, there are 2 forms of extremism which is prevalent in India. One is the oldest form, that is Naxalism, that is about 50 years old. That is the oldest form of extremism, that is Naxalism. And the modern form of extremism, I would say, it's the terrorism. So it's first started somewhere around 80s, and it's still continuing. Now, both this Naxalism and terrorism has a lot of socioeconomic problems, like industries are not going there. Most of the businessmen, they are shying away from setting up businesses. So youths are not getting opportunity to study. Most of them are indulging in stone pelting, especially in Kashmir, if you are following that Kashmir incident. So terrorism is mainly related to one of the states, that is Jammu and Kashmir, which shares its border with Pakistan. And about extremist group, we have some homegrown extremist group like Indian Mujahideen and Simi. They have been declared unlawful by Indian governments, but yes, investigating agencies believe that there are certain sleeper cells which are still working there. And we have also found involvement of some non-state actors from neighboring countries who are actively supporting terrorism or exporting terrorism to India. That is there. And at present, yes, other than I was listening to Kylie, he said that he talked about poverty and other things. No doubt, poverty and lack of employment is the main cause of pushing people into extremism. But what we are seeing in India about the investigating agencies which they are seeing is that, a lot of educated youths are also joining or taking up guns. Recently, we had one professor. He joined militancy and he was killed by security forces. And before that, last year, there was one poster boy His name was Burhan Wani. He was also killed by terrorists, but he was the poster boy of the terrorist because he was young. He was attracting others through use of social media. So these are the new, ways how terrorism is coming up in this country. So yes, both the government and the civic society, they are trying their bit to contain it, but it's like a cancer. And it's fast expanding. So we need to check it. And yes, investigating agencies, government, civic society, they are doing their bit.
Thank you. MIGS, the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies, back in November, we gathered 150 people from legislators and experts from all around the world in Milan to talk about these issues. And we had diverse views from Iraq, we had people from Nigeria, and Cal was there in Milan, and now we have produced a report which you can actually read online. And Cal, I would like to say, I would like to ask you perhaps to tell me a little bit more and tell us a bit more about what you heard from different legislators. I know we heard from people in Venezuela, we heard from Iraqis, and we heard from people in Nigeria.
We helped convene something called the Milan Forum for Parliamentary Action in Preventing Violent Extremism and Mass Atrocities. And what it came out of, Parliamentarians for Global Action, which is a network of parliamentarians around the world. They actually had a whole group of parliamentarians that are members of this group from North Africa and the Middle East came to PGA, that's their name in short, and said, listen, extremism is starting to take hold in some of our societies. We need help. And these extremists, their aim is, one of their first objectives is to destroy democracy. They don't believe in representative government. They don't believe that human beings should set our own laws. So they felt very vulnerable and they wanted support. So we convened some of the top experts on the planet on violent extremism, on human rights, and there was a exceptionally, as one can imagine, many debates. We actually had quite a few MPs from West Africa, a region affected by Boko Haram, that were very, they basically said everything, it was all caused by poverty. And there was even some conspiracy theorists saying that Boko Haram was controlled by the French government. We heard lots of interesting things, but there was, I even found that there were some MPs that are dealing with a serious crisis that's affecting Chad, Niger, Nigeria, Cameroon, that were unwilling to admit that the group that was carrying out violent acts, when they commit attacks or they kidnap 300 girls, they're not saying they're doing that because they want a bigger piece of the economic puzzle. They're saying that they have a political project which is very similar to what ISIS was trying to do in Iraq and Syria. So we came up with a lot of acts about what can democracies, what can legislatures do to act early on to prevent people from moving toward violent extremism. So we have a handbook that's online. We launched it in the Canadian Parliament, but it's very useful for journalists as well because it outlines a whole set of what other governments are doing. It compares national action plans for de-radicalization, and it cites that, yes, most of the terrorist attacks we're seeing now are coming from groups like Boko Haram and ISIS. It could change. We're in the fourth wave of terrorism. It used to be the Europe experience in the 80s and 90s was mostly left-wing terrorism. Now we're seeing something of more religious political nature, but it is something that we produced, and we did believe that we have to strengthen democracies because some of these extremists, they're against pluralism, they're against multiculturalism, they're against democracy. They really do have a plan that that is counter to international human rights norms. So our handbook was an attempt to better educate our elected leaders and help them seize this moment.
Hani, how has the Egyptian government responded? I know Sisi passed a law of state emergency, and he's trying to set up some body to combat extremism, but I think he's also very much criticized for perhaps driving extremism in a way as well.
I think that in April 2017, after two church attacks, in the first one in Tanta in the north of Egypt, and the second one in Alexandria It is the main church for Coptic Orthodox by ISIS. So it's a big attack, and maybe I think is more than 40 people killed. So the Egyptian people is very sad for these attacks, because we have a bad memories about in 2016 in December, also Montreux church attacks by ISIS. In January 2011 is attack in Alexandria. So it's 4 attacks in last 10 years. So Sisi declared the state of emergency to try to solve the problem. But I think is the main problem not for emergency. We have to solve the culture, we have to solve the education system. Because the young people born with, grow up with not correct ideas, and the programs in TV, we have a problem. Maybe you can show for one person to talk about diversity and dialogue and the good relationship between Muslims and the Christian. But in the another event, he told with bad idea about this relation. So we have this main problem. And sometimes the TV support them. I think is why you talk with this person, you must ignore them, because they have a lot of bad idea, and this is the source for the extremism groups. I didn't dislike to listen to them, but it's a surprise for Egyptian people how this person interview with famous TV. And they tell about them. It's a good persons for the diversity. This is the problem. So if we wanted to solve the education system, I think some NGOs, associations try to help the Ministry of Education to establish a curriculum for human rights and citizenship. But the other problem for the teachers, we must do training, a lot of training for teachers to how to make this curriculum for young people. So maybe after 10 years we can solve it, but it's too hard. Till now we have 2 years after emergency of state, but I think this is terrorism attack didn't stop. So I think the government must to think what the other ways to combating the extremism.
Yeah, that's one thing I want to discuss is how, have you seen any good like civil society groups or NGOs doing good work in, for example, in India to kind of bring communities together or prevent violent extremism?
See, this extremists, they have a very selfish motive, first of all. They want to terrorize people. That's the only motive they have, and they thrive on it. And of course, there are certain vested interests involved. So, as you were asking about some good initiatives which are being undertaken, yes, there are some. But again, their attempts are also thwarted. Like there are NGOs, civic societies, which want to come forward. They want to work. They are still working. They want to educate the children who are affected by this violence. They are providing good educations and the job opportunities that they are providing. But again, whosoever comes forward, these extremist groups, they target them. So again, the whole attempt goes back to square one. Nothing is moved. So that is happening. But good initiatives are also being taken by the Indian government. They are trying to rehabilitate the peoples who have been affected by this violence. And they are also asking militants to come forward to surrender. So those things are happening. But again, if numbers are to be seen, almost thousands of people have lost their lives in Kashmir alone. I mean, Kashmir shares its border with Pakistan. So 1,000 people have lost their lives. And again, the trend shows that a lot many people are joining these groups, these movements. As I said, that there are a lot of young populations, so they are getting radicalized. There are groups which are exploiting the gaps which are left, by the government, and they're exploiting them. So there are good initiatives, but they are not doing. They're not able to control this.
The environment they work in is very difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, I just want to say, if you have a question, just raise your hand, or if you have something to say about the region you come from, please don't hesitate. We want this to be really an open discussion. So if you have something to say, please raise your hand. Also, I want to talk about you want to talk about social media and how terrorist groups, what they say on social media, especially Facebook and Twitter. I know you want to say something about that, and I know Cal has a lot to say about that as well.
Social media is the new challenge for Indian security agencies. In Kashmir alone, there are 600 WhatsApp group, and they are working actively to radicalize people. They are spreading all sort of fake news, doctored videos, concocted videos, just to influence youths. So 600 WhatsApp group. It may sound small, I don't know, but it's a huge problem for Indian security agencies. And social media, there was a news in May. Facebook shut down 583 million fake accounts as they were spreading fake news or the violent contents. 583 million, and a lot of those accounts were in Asia, mainly in India. So of course there are social media is being misused by these radical elements. They are trying to influence new recruits, especially the youths. They want to corrupt their mind, poison their mind by saying that yes, you are being oppressed or suppressed by the state or the government. You're not getting what you should be getting, and you should take up the guns. To get what you should be getting. And again, the WhatsApp group, as I said, they're also doing the same thing. So yes, social media is again the latest challenge which Indian government is facing, and they are trying to control it also.
Perhaps do you want to say, I know we studied Myanmar quite a little bit, for example.
No, it's interesting because we first came here 4 years ago, and our panel we proposed was violent extremism and the internet. And we were yelling for years, the Canadian government to the UN, listen, you got to take this seriously. Non-state actors are using social media platforms to cross international borders, to get into the homes of youth in any country, and use very violent imagery to try to brainwash people or incite them to commit violence. So we've been talking about this for 4 years, and it's only in the last 2 years that the major social media tech giants, Twitter, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, have actually come together at the UN through the UN Security Council and something called the UN Counterterrorism Executive Directorate. Our institution is a research partner, and I think and then now there's the UN. There's another group that they just set up. They created something called Tech Against Terrorism. So finally, we're seeing these companies take this seriously, realize that they have a corporate social responsibility, that people are using their platforms to incite hate. And they're starting to actually to do more. They've also put a lot of pressure by governments. Germany has passed a law, I'm sure you know, on Facebook and companies that if you don't delete hate speech from your platform in 24 hours, you're going to get sued. We know from cases from the Holocaust or the Rwandan genocide, traditional media can be used to inculcate hate towards others, to incite others to commit violent acts. Social media is now being used by non-state actors the same way that governments used 40, 50, 60 years ago. So this is something that we have to take seriously, and we're now seeing these tech firms start to deploy artificial intelligence to deal with the enormous amount of violent content on their platforms. It's in the millions, if not tens of millions, of stuff being shared every day in videos that they can't do it with human labor alone. They're now turning to AI-powered algorithms to try to delete it off their platforms. But this is something that unfortunately is going to be with us for a while.
Mary, if I may add, you see, I would like to share one example. What happened in 2011, one of the camps of Indian Army was attacked by a group of terrorists. So later these terrorists were arrested, and the interrogation of one of the terrorists revealed that he was influenced by a doctored video which was spread massively on social media. He said it. It is an open document. It has been produced before the court in India. He said that. So what I'm saying is these radical elements, they are trying to influence the youth. They are showing all kinds of, doctor videos just to influence them. And as a result, they are attacking these people. I mean, these army, the installments and other things.
Yeah, we have seen similar cases in Myanmar where Buddhist extremists have basically called for others to attack Muslims because they were supposedly trying to destroy the country, basically. And the New York Times has done a very a good study on this, and I encourage you to read it, because that's where you really see how extremist groups or the authorities will exploit perceived grievances to call for violence against religious minorities.
Yeah. Also, I could just add to that, Marie. I mean, we've seen this. We've seen that Facebook is being the main platform for incitement to violence against the Rohingya minority in Myanmar. Recently, we had intercommunal violence in Sri Lanka between the Buddhist majority and the Muslim minority. The government shut down Snapchat and other platforms to stop people from organizing attacks, civil society-led attacks against other members of groups. So this is something that's really with us, and governments need to get up to speed and hire people with digital skills to be able to track this in real time, because we're seeing that what happens online has an offline impact on people's lives.
Yeah, Hani.
I think is social media. We must to not control, but we wanted to follow what the youth and the young people need, because sometimes we have pages invited young people to join the extremism groups. I think in Egypt we have a lot of audience, maybe for 40 million or more use social media. But sometimes the government just closed the political pages. But a lot of pages maybe talks about culture, but this is not page for culture, this page for violent ideas. So it's different. Sometimes this idea is hidden, but the young people grow up with this idea, and finally the government try to combating extremism. So it's a problem. We must to close it from before invite the youth people.
If I may add, you see, there is no denying the fact that there is a freedom of expression. You may express whatever, of course, it's your choice what to write there on, but there is indeed a need to regulate or supervise content which goes on cyberspace, because a lot of young minds are also on cyberspace. They are seeing what goes on internet. So there is a serious need to check the content, especially those which are, which tends to influence the youth towards extremism. So that's the need of the hour.
Thank you. Question?
Thank you very much for your insight. My name is Abir Saadi. I am a war correspondent and currently doing my PhD in Germany here in Erasmus Institute. So I totally agree with you about the poor theory, that it's no longer, and I see them like more like justice finders. And I say this from my capacity. I worked in Afghanistan, I work in Iraq and Syria, and I've seen those groups in person. I've seen even the ones in Boko Haram. And for 2 years, I've been studying their discourses. So their discourses on social media is really complicated. It's targeting. Their media strategy is so strong. But at the end of the day, most of the people are self-radicalized. That means if we want to counter them, we have to study their discourse. And I mean, as academics, as a journalist, all the stakeholders. And on the other side, we have to not make them really monopoly the religion. And the ideology is something very strong, but it's not the ideology only. It's democracy as well, because it's an injusticeness of the lots of regimes. And that's, I'm Egyptian, by the way, like Hani. And sometimes the injusticeness gets people to exist. The lack of representation, and you are very right about that, of the youth of the people, lack of potential, those things leads to radicalism. So we don't have to let them monopoly religion. We don't fight religion, because as you say, like Buddhism as well, they have this. It's not only we as Muslims have it. It's a very important to create potentials for the young people. I want to say something. For Egypt, for example, we have a big number of young people. Those people have a potential. If there is justice, I don't think people will go to that. And don't forget as well, even here in Europe, there is a lot of self-radicalized lone wolves. And lone wolves are really more serious than the packs of wolves you can find in some areas that they can control for some time. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Gabayo. I work for Deutsche Welle. I'm a correspondent. On the nexus of inequality and extremism, I think, if I follow correctly, I heard that necessarily inequality may not lead to extremism. I have a reservation on that, because is it not inequality the source of every type of problems? I mean, be it crime or extremism is another form, of course. Even here in Europe, who are voting for the extreme rights, that's also another form of extremism. So if we say the ideology, always the ideologues are at higher level, but who are the followers or the voters? These are people who are deprived, marginalized, and were frustrated, and all types of emotions are disturbed. So is it not undermining when we say that the nexus between extremism and inequality is less, because while it is really the main umbrella source of the problem? Thank you.
If I can, I didn't mean to say that there isn't any link. I don't think it's the main driving factor, and that's when I say, if you look at Gini coefficients in societies, those countries with the largest amount of inequalities are not producing the kind of violent extremism that is on the front pages of our newspapers every day. What I do think is driving some of the extremism, as I mentioned in my first comment, there has to be a real or perceived form of injustice. So we saw, particularly of Western Europeans or North Americans traveling to join ISIS. They felt that the Sunni Muslim population in Syria was being attacked and is facing a genocide. They felt that they had to go there to defend them because no one else was doing anything. So that's the real sense of perceived injustice. Didn't have anything to do with poverty. It had to deal with people losing their lives and mass atrocity crimes and the paralysis of the UN system to do anything about that. Similar to what we saw, of some foreign fighters that went into Bosnia during the Balkan Wars, where they felt that the Muslim majority of Bosnia and Herzegovina was being attacked. No one was doing anything. So there has to be a sense of injustice. But I just think that sometimes the ideology explaining that makes it very black and white. Doesn't have any nuance, and I'm just afraid that many youth that have gone to join these groups in Iraq and Syria have lost their lives. Their families are destroyed because they were also sold a not complete narrative as to what they were going to fight for and whether they were really going to make a difference. But poverty, inequalities can contribute to it, but I don't think it's the driving factor. I think it's more of an injustice which is related to human rights abuses or repressive regimes.
Basically, what we want to say as well, it's these extremist groups, be there from the right or from the left, they exploit perceived grievances. And if you look at the extreme right, for example, I'm taking the example of Quebec, where the extreme right is a little bit on the rise. And if you look at the discourse of these like small extreme right, groups, what they say is, oh, immigrants are stealing your jobs, and they're mostly men joining these movements. They're perfectly fine. They have a job and everything. It's just that they're being sold this narrative that there's injustice against them. And so they feel like they have to support these extreme rights movements. I know there was a question over there.
Thank you. Hi, this is Nasser Maimanigi from Afghanistan. I lead the biggest network of radio stations in the country. When you talk about extremism, of course, one of the big pictures that comes to your mind is Afghanistan. But my grandfather used to tell me, and his brother, actually, they used to tell me stories of how the Americans in the 60s and in the 70s, they would come not only to smoke hashish, because Afghanistan apparently has the best hashish in the world, and it still produces so much of it now. But you know, they were adventurers that they want to see the new place, and some stayed there to learn the way of the life of the people. Thomas Barfield, he has stories, he has written about Afghanistan, and so many others. And then the Russian invasion happened, and afterwards things changed. Now people, you know, you go in small communities, you see hatred towards specific groups of people. It didn't just start right away. Unfortunately, there was a measured step to make sure that people become extremists. In high schools, in schools actually, as primary schools, the textbooks that were printed in with the help of Nebraska in Pakistan, it injected extremist ideas into kids in their minds. Ideas that, you know, anyone who was a communist was supposed to be killed. Grade 1 math, for example, said Ahmad kills 2 communists and James kills 5 communists. How many of them are killed? How many commies are killed? Now, to an ordinary Afghan, I'm sure they wouldn't differentiate. They cannot differentiate between an American, a Canadian, an Australian, or a Russian. They all look the same. You know, they don't understand the language, and they didn't. Unfortunately, that continued to, you know, or in that case, religion and culture was mostly used for back then a good cause, but it mushroomed into something much bigger. But I remember talking to one of the Egyptian officials about this issue, and he said something really interesting. He said that you know, no matter what type of government or in which country you are, you're going to find people who are going to dislike your policies. They're going to dislike the form of government. No matter what happens, there's always a group of people who don't want to fit in. And what do you do with them? In their case, they said, well, we sent them to Afghanistan. And they still send so many to Afghanistan. You know, and there are over 20 or so groups. Then you look at what is the government and the international community doing about extremism in Afghanistan. You know, when as chaotic as it was when the Russians attacked, you know, the Saudis were doing their own thing, Brits were doing their own thing, Americans were doing their own thing, but they had they got the end result. But now the end result is not any close. You know, they don't know. They're doing things in silos, but there isn't a coordinated measure that is taken either by the government of Afghanistan or by the international community. And religious extremism is still in great force happening in Afghanistan. You know, there in one of the western provinces in Herat, for example, there are over 6,000 unregistered madrasas. The Iranians have their own interests. The Pakistanis, through Deobandi school, has its own interest. In the Saudis, they have their own interest. So it's in a way, you know, the regional politics is being played in Afghanistan, in the provinces, in small communities, and for those groups, it doesn't really matter what I think the bigger outcome would be as a whole, but they're interested in smaller outcomes, and that outcome is to defeat their own enemy. Saudis and Iranians are heavily playing it out in communities in Afghanistan. When you talk about media and media's involvement, media has unfortunately a very limited option, because media is not creator of content. Media relies within the society, or within pockets of within the society, to produce content so that they can relate to the people. Media are not experts on why extremism happened and what are some of the solutions of extremism and how to address extremism. Media rely on that. How many institutions you have in Afghanistan that work on it? Very few. Unfortunately, most of the work of the international community has been very project-based. They have come, they have scratched the surface, written a report, and then gone back. They haven't really looked at some of the core reasons as to why people become extremists. I'm sure it's not just like people who get addicted to heroin and so on. There are social causes as well as there are individual reasons behind it. Thanks.
Thank you. Do you want to say something, Wissal?
My name is Eliani A. Rahman, and I sit on Twitter's Trust and Safety Council. Earlier, we had talked about extremism and how various extremist groups are using social media to basically incite hatred against various people and get more members on board. If you yourself, Mr. Ashwani, Kyle, Mr. Hani, also members of the audience, if you come across such groups in your own countries and have issues with that, just tweet at Twitter Safety. And for those who know me personally, just tweet at me at Eliani. Right now, we have a meeting in July it's a Twitter summit that we take place every year. We try to improve the whole algorithm and the filters to try and make it a safer and better experience for everyone. Obviously, Twitter has a lot of issues to still deal with. I'm very aware of that. But anything that we can do to improve and try and block such groups and basically freeze their accounts, I would welcome that. So just give me a feedback and tweet at Twitter Safety or to me if you know me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erwin. And I think there's a good point there. If you see someone online promoting extremism, inciting people to commit violence against certain people on their identity, report them. There's Twitter, Facebook have functions where you can report people and get them kicked offline. I do it all the time. And I think if we had a more active group of digital citizens out there, we might be able to at least limit the online impact of different extremist groups across the board.
I would like to add one thing. We all are aware that how to check these groups or the individuals who are spreading this violent things on internet. But you see what happens, the frequency of uploading these contents are at such a higher pace that one really finds difficulty. How many accounts would you report? 1, 2, 3, 4? And how many times? You can't be all the time on internet reporting, look, A account is posting this thing, B account. There has to be something, maybe from your side or maybe from the government side, to regulate these things. Individually, I feel it would be a little difficult because there is a organized chain. There are organized group of individuals who are working, I suppose, I won't be surprised, 24/7 to put all these negative elements into the cyberspace. So it requires a lot of big efforts to check it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mohammed Al-Ahmadi. I'm a journalist from Tunisia. So I'm not sure. First of all, sorry for my bad English. This is not my very best language. But now we are talking about the relationship between inequalities and extremism. Or is extremism is a result? Is it the main reason? Sadly, I come from Tunisia. Hopefully. But sadly, Tunisia is considered the country with the most foreign fighters in ISIS. So what we have in Tunisia, I think this may help, because me, as a journalist, as media expert, and as fixer, I work a lot with searcher and foreign journalists, European, who come to Tunisia to try to understand what's going on and why there is a lot of people. So for the, let's say, the 6 last years, I was in this. So there is something that I want to share about this now. In Tunisia, we don't have a great inequality, at least for the, it started to be now, but in the past there is not this. In the moment, I was all the time asking, I come from Sidi Bouzid, a country in the middle of Tunisia. It's a country with great discrimination. The Tunisian revolution started there because people feel the injustice. So, if I think this is inequality, I don't know. But there is a moment that I want to share here. I share it with everybody I work with. I think this is important to know. Me, I'm a journalist. There's one day in 2015, I was in the street to cover, how to say, manifestation, demonstration, and somewhere police have attacked. I'm a journalist with press, and in a moment I haven't felt nothing, and a couple minutes later I was in the police station. What's going on? I'm a journalist. And okay, I spent 2 hours or 3 there. By the end of the day, I was beaten by police. I was humiliated, oppressed. Getting the police station, I was literally talking to myself. I said, come on, me, I have a life. I have a job, I have a family, I have another family, and I have a lot of things that attach me to this. But let's think to my friends or people that I know that was in ISIS, that gone to Libya, to Syria, to Germany, and they have nothing they can lose. And by the end of the day, the most of those people was oppressed by police. They are not all poor. We can't talk about poverty till the point we can't find something to eat. It's poverty. We can't have a good car. We can't have a house. We must rent a house. But we have always something to eat. We can find something. But the thing between all of these people are they're oppressed by the police. Equality, in Tunisia, there is not a lot of this. We are a small country, 10 millions, but we have a couple of thousands terrorists in Syria. So it's just, sorry to be too long, but...
No, that's good, thank you. I mean, one of the things we want to show here is that each region is also different. You know, and each individual is different and has a different path towards radicalization. Pass one last word, honey.
Just I'd like to answer about this issue, because Tunisia is a very good example for our session. The most question today, the Western countries wanted to combating extremism or not. If you need that, you must help Tunisia and Jordan, for example, because a lot of Egypt, Morocco, because it's a lot of problem for economic. And young people, when can't the government not help them, join with extremism groups. But the International Bank, for example, told Tunisia to get hard steps like Egypt. So the citizens refuse these steps. After, like last week, Jordanian protested with these steps. So what happened is Western countries, what you need, you want to combating extremism or not? So Tunisia, a lot of people fight with ISIS. I think is a very important question. Why that? And you wanted to solve this problem. So economic, education, culture, a lot of steps to success in our side.
Yeah, and one last word as well for me. I come from Belgium, and you all know that Belgium somehow, it's a small country, still managed to have a lot of people who went to Syria and Iraq, and those are the questions I ask myself all the time as well, because I know, I mean, Belgium is a rich country, right? So I want to thank you, the three of you, for participating and for making the long trip, because Egypt and India is quite far away. And I want to thank you for attending this talk, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions for speakers as well that you can ask now. And I encourage you as well to read the report and to get in touch with us should you have questions. There are videos online as well of the different legislators talking about the situation in their country. And I think that's why we like to come to Deutsche Welle every year, because we get these point of views from different regions, from journalists like you. And we'll listen to Rukmini Kalimachi's podcast, Attack Caliphate, and I hear your voice in that too. So thank you very much.